Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me tonight I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Good evening, Alex. It's good to be back. I'm doing well.
Yeah. Hopefully, it would have been nice if it was under slightly better circumstances, but the slide continues. So before we jumped into the games that we've had over the last couple of days, because you haven't been on for a while, I thought I'd just get your take on, I guess, the season as a whole. It started with a lot of promise, chances of playoffs. Bowen and Grzycki then sold, and now the situation we're in. But what's your take on it been, and how do you see it panning out?
I guess it's probably one of those seasons where you could talk about it being a tale of two halves in some respects, with I guess the optimism that seemingly did surround the place not too long ago. Certainly around Christmas, we still well and truly thought that promotion was on the table, and we kept kind of nipping at the heels of the top six. But obviously, since the Christmas break and with the obviously significant sales of Bowen and Grzycki and this terrible patch of form that we've been in at the moment, it's really hard to see or to find optimism in any aspects, really. So I guess the I think it's 9 games now without a
Yeah.
win, and that slide is extremely worrying considering we're right back in the thick of the relegation fight. And I guess the game against Barnsley this morning summed that up and kind of made us realise that if there was ever any doubt if we were in that pack of relegation troubled teams, I think the question's been answered that we certainly are, and it's going to be a very interesting next few weeks as we seek to try and keep our championship status.
Western game that McGann would have said that, we're not in a relegation fight, we're only 4 points off 12th, and I think after the Barnsley game he's finally conceded that actually, yes, we are in a relegation fight. It's a tough one because I sort of looked at the table a while ago when we were, I think, about 10 points ahead of Wigan and thought, there's half a dozen teams between us and the relegation pack. So, even when you look at the points tally, it's not just that, it's also the amount of teams because, it's a big difference between if we were 21st and Wigan were 22nd and Wigan were 10 points behind us. It's just they just have to get 10 points to get ahead of us. When there was all those teams, it was also, although all of those teams had to get ahead of us. And the number of teams between us and the relegation zone is sort of rapidly diminishing. You look at the fact that in the last couple of games, I think Luton have won 3 of their last 4, Wigan have won 2 in a row, and Barnsley have now won 3 in a row as well, the latest coming against us. So it's not even just the fact that 1 or 2 of the teams in the bottom 3 is starting to pick up form, it's that all 3 of them are really starting to get going. So very concerning, only 4 points off the relegation places now. It was 2 defeats, probably a bit more of a promising display against Preston. We did take the lead in the first half through Wilkes. And to be honest, I want to get your take on Wilkes as the signing so far, because I think, coming in, he sort of struck me as someone that needed to get on that sort of run of games and scoring, and that confidence would sort of breed more confidence. And I think when he started playing for us, he was maybe a little bit unfit because he hadn't been playing for Barnsley. And I think a few fans might have got on his back about that. But, he was always going to be him and I guess Samuelson, who also looked really impressive this morning, were the two, and I guess Maddison as well, the players that had that sort of, enthusiasm, creativity and attacking drive that, if we could get 1 or 2 of them to really kick on, they were the big hope for rescuing our second half of the season, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess you've already mentioned the fact that they are big hopes for rescuing our season. We're realizing that we're not really spoilt for attacking options. I think that's probably an understatement of the year in many respects. But yeah, as you mentioned, Wilkes wasn't playing regular first team football for Barnsley, who obviously were in the relegation positions as well. So for him to come in and somewhat hit the ground running for us, it does seem like an unlikely goal scorer, but as you mentioned, he definitely has the attributes to be one of those key players for the run in. He has got a few goals, which has bred confidence, and I guess all the signs are there that there is some potential in him as a player to potentially score some really significant goals. And I guess when you're in a relegation fight, it doesn't matter where they come from, but if you've got at least 1 or 2 players who are frequently finding themselves in the goals, well, then you're a hope. And I don't think it really matters where they come from. But if it is coming from your number 9 or one of your regular attacking players, so long as they're getting minutes, we're a chance. It's a huge find in the sense that he is an unlikely addition. But yeah, if he can keep up the kind of a prolific form that he has showed the last few weeks, then it will go some way to securing our safety.
Yeah, and definitely with the news that Tom Eaves has now been ruled out for the season as well, which is pretty incredible. You look at our injury list and you look at our injury record, not just this season really, but probably I'm thinking back, almost as far as since I've been supporting City, and I don't know, maybe beyond that as well. It just seems that as a club, we just have the most, unfortunate run of injuries, and whether that's down to the conditions at the training ground, whether it's down to the fitness staff, I don't know what it is, but it just seems remarkable the amount of soft tissue injuries that we seem to be picking up, especially this season. I think Madison and Terrell went off in the first, just after half time, I think it was. Both supposedly with injuries. Terrell's now confirmed as out injured. Burke and Device also apparently injured again. And then, as I said, Eve's out for the season. So Wilkes now really becoming a really important player for us in that attacking third, but a huge concern for the fitness of the entire squad, really.
Yeah, exactly. And this question was pitched to Ehab actually in the interview, and that question did actually centre around, does it concern him that the players that we have picked up, and there seems to be this worrying trend in City's injury ranks, and it's not just something that's reminiscent of this season, but it's rather something that has occurred quite frequently over the last few years. I think Jordy Device is one of those players to me that we realise how critical he is in the City setup, and when he is anchoring our defence, we look a totally different side. But it's no secret that he has had some very frequent injuries. When you've got key players like him missing for a relegation fight, that's exactly right. It does leave a lot to the imagination. I mean, Ehab's response was that they've been looking at the data and they are now starting to recruit players that are younger and don't have those extensive injury records. But I guess I'm yet to be convinced of that.
I laugh because, of course, we picked up Scott from, was it Motherwell? And I think it was, an unblemished injury record. And, of course, I think it was the second that he stepped on the pitch at the City training ground and he twisted his ankle and is out for the season. So I think, Ehab can say what he wants about trying to recruit players with good injury records, but you look at Madison, you look at Eves, these are players that we've recruited this season, and they're also struggling for injuries as well. So I think there's got to be more to it than that. I think whether it's a question of McGann's playing style, expecting the players to be running a lot harder than they're able to, whether it's a question of the fitness staff and whether they're, or the medical staff, whether they're rehabilitating players properly, I don't know what it is. But, as you say, I mean, it's gone back a number of years now. You look back at the Bruce days when we got relegated from the Premier League, and I really would have thought at the time the Allams would have looked at the fact that injuries cost us so severely that season and put a whole heap of effort into improving our data around rehabilitation from injuries, about playing time, managing minutes, all of that sort of thing. But it's just the same old story. So it's just, I really don't know what the answer is. And of course, I think with Dan, I was saying last week, we've also had our share of just horrendous luck. You look at Snodgrass's dislocated knee, you look at Bullard, you look at as I said, Scott this season, of course, Angus MacDonald with cancer. These are sort of the freak accidents, but even the freak accidents seem to happen more often than not for us. So it's a very concerning one.
I laughed as you said that as well, because I even forgot about Norbert Bello.
Of course, yeah. Him as
well. Who we can add to that list is innocuous injuries of people who kind of found themselves hurt before they even really got playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the other angle that we need to look at, and I sort of alluded to it before with McGann's comments after the Preston game, but questions kind of need to start to be asked about his position as well. And I'm firmly in the camp of I think he's doing the best he can with the players available. But in saying that, you have to look at the fact it's a 9-game winless run. He's sort of denied being in a relegation fight up until this point. He potentially hasn't been using the fact that we were sitting off Barnsley at home against the bottom side in the division can't be just the players being nervous. It's got to have been some sort of, whether he was saying, look, we're going to sit off and we're going to hit them on the counter. At home to the bottom side, you've got to be on the front foot. You've got to be dominating possession. You've got to be dominating the chances. And I think it was 14 shots to 1 at half time. So you can't put that all down to the players. And I've got to ask, what's your opinion on his managerial stint, on his tenure at the club? Do you think he's sort of living on borrowed time to an extent, or do you think he'll see out the season?
In order to answer that question, Alex, I believe we've even got to go back further down the track, and I think we're looking down the barrel of something ridiculous. I think I read that this is maybe Hull's 8th manager in 9 years or something like, and we have to consider in that time period, Steve Bruce has been responsible for a large chunk of that period anyway. Yeah. So we can isolate it and talk about McCann, whether he is fit for work at City at the moment, but realistically, we've got a cultural problem which everybody's aware of, in the fact that we're trying to plug holes all the time and get managers to come in and kind of lead or facilitate this rebuild. And there's only so many times you can rebuild. I think that we looked at the under Nigel Atkins, and we looked at the job he did, and he really seemed to build some kind of belief and sense of culture in the club of this attacking brand that Ehab talks so strongly about. Play, and how much of a shift it was. We had that in Atkins, and then for whatever reason, they didn't go above and beyond to make sure that contract happened, because they couldn't assure him the guarantees he was looking for. So as a fan group, obviously the concerns and questions just have to continue to be asked is, what's going to happen if McCann gets the sack? Who's the next progression? Yeah. Because it's probably going to be another low league manager that they're going to find who's going to give it a chance to. They're going to inherit essentially a League One squad for championship survival. And I read the article that Swanee put out as well that talks about how the amount of games, and we need to allow these players times to adjust, because a lot of them are League One players with championship experience, when we're coming from a time period where it was Premier League players with championship experience as well. So I guess the players we were losing were Huddleston, Davies, guys who were Premier League pedigree, who kind of played championship games and then got shipped off for small fees. So if not McCann, I'm not sure. You are right that he is in a position where, 9 games without a result, without a win, is very testing, but I just don't see a progression from him. So I think that he's probably going to be safe on the grounds that there's not really anyone else that I believe that the Allams would show the intent to go out and get.
No, I completely agree. And I think you're right to look at the fact that over this spell of, I guess it's basically since we were promoted to the Premier League in 2016, I want to say it was. No, it would have been, was it 2017? I always get my years wrong. Basically, the season we got promoted under Bruce and he walked away. From that point on, we've had Phelan, Silva, Slutsky, Adkins, and McCann. And you just look at the squad, and basically the core of that squad was the squad that Bruce built and Bruce put together, and we've sort of slowly bled that dry, slowly, sold off the assets and made a bit of money, brought in arguably championship quality players, and our attention slowly slipped further and further down into now League One players, and even to the point of recruiting a good, reasonable League One manager. And the old adage is, you're recruiting League One players, you'll end up in League One. And, there's always exceptions to that. You look at Sheffield United and how they've done. But the common theme of any successful side, as you say, is it's building that belief, building that togetherness and the commitment and the belief in the cause. And I saw on Twitter today someone making the reasonable point, not completely accurate, that a lot of these players are out of contract in the summer and therefore have no motivation to play for City. And while that's not entirely true, because a lot of them do have 1-year contract clause extension triggers in the club's favour, so we could re-sign Irvine, Terrell, Stewart, etc. The truth is, a lot of them probably will walk away. Terrell, with his injury record, I don't think will get a new deal. Stewart as well, I've heard, is on the fence, which is a little bit surprising. I thought we'd be keen to keep him around, but there are a few players where maybe they look at the situation and say, where's the motivation to try? There's 8,000-9,000 in the crowd each week. There's, no sort of sense of desire or ambition from the owners because they've sold our 2 best players. And what are the players really fighting for if not for, I guess their own pride is really what should be motivating them. But at the end of the day, as you say, it's not really McGann's fault that the club is slowly bleeding off these players. And he is trying to do the best with what he's got. And look, it's a really tough game coming up, which we'll touch on in a second, but it's just, we've got to roll up our sleeves and really get stuck into it. And I have to hope that losing to Barnsley is that wake-up call that we needed. And, it's now McGann's now acknowledging we're in a relegation fight. The players are going to have to start acknowledging it, and they're really going to have to focus and try and pull us out.
Absolutely. And the question I have for you, Alex, is whereabouts are the leaders in this playing group? Who are the key figures that are the people who are going to stand up and kind of take the season by the horns? Because, we're talking about players in the past under the Bruce era. We had a lot of leaders in that playing group. You had your Curtis Davies. It doesn't even matter to start. Even players like David Myler, they're extremely capped, and although they're not always exactly the most celebrated of players, they have that experience and they have the ability to lead a team and to respond after you have a disappointing result, which we all know that's one of the things that has to be synonymous with a championship season. Is you have to be able to dust yourself off and go again 2 or 3 days later, because if you dwell on the result, you find yourself in a slump, which is obviously what we're experiencing at this point in time.
Yeah, and I mean, look, and I guess the concerning thing is that you can't even pinpoint a particular area of the pitch. It's not, the midfield is concerning because it doesn't really gel. We seem to be constantly changing our shape in midfield. Our attack is pretty much non-existent at the moment. It seems to just be Magennis, and especially with Eves now out injured. And the defence, I mean, the one real leader, when you ask that question, that I would point to is Geordie Device, and he seems to be that natural sort of leading centre-back who, almost in that, Van Dijk mould or that sort of thing, and I think he's been compared to him before in terms of his importance in the side, but he seems to be that and that drive, and he can pull the side together, and it's really unfortunate how injury-prone he seems to be this season because of his importance.
That's right, and obviously we as Australians, we enjoy the fact that we know that Jackson Irvine has a championship captaincy gig, and whilst I celebrate that, and I think it's a great thing for him moving forward, and certainly in his career. When Jackson Irvine signed for the club for about £2 million, I believe, I was excited by the fact that we had Jackson Irvine at the club, but I guess the questions that we were asking was Jackson Irvine going to be able to hold his spot in the team? What was he going to look like in this attack and things like that? And now you look to him in a very short time since he signed, and he is one of the key figures that kind of make that up. And it's amazing to me, with no disrespect to Jackson, how highly he's viewed in the rank of the team in such a short time, given the fact that it's probably coincided with a digression in the caliber of players in some aspects.
Well, the amazing thing is he's almost one of our longest serving players now, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, which is reflective of the times, and just kind of highlights to us the transition period that we are going in, that it's probably even come a little bit too soon for him in the way he views it, because of all these changes he's been forced to kind of deal with, and they've just kept bumping him up the ranks into this kind of leadership role. And what we do, we wish him all the best and hope that he is able to galvanise this team. But there's some huge concerns over the actual leadership group that does exist at Hull. And hey, look, we're optimistic that one will emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hey, at least we've got an easy game next. We'll look ahead to that game now, and it is, of course, against Leeds. Probably biggest rivals in the division. And our very own Mitch is over in England and will be at that game. So I'm going to try and chat to him after the game, maybe a day after the game, just to get his thoughts on his first experience watching City at the KCOM. I'm praying for him that it's not a drubbing. All the signs sort of point to Leeds really doing one on us, because they've started to pick their form back up. They sort of did their customary January, February choke, and they really looked like they were going to drop out of those automatic spots, which was of course always the hope. But they've pulled it together now. They've got 3 wins in a row, and they're looking a lot more solid. I guess the one sort of bit of hope that I'd cling to is looking at their result against Middlesbrough this morning. By all reports, they really did not play well at all. They were really sort of brought down to Middlesbrough's level. And if they're going to get brought down to their opposition's level, they're going to be awful on Saturday night against us. Early game, televised over here in Australia, which makes it a bit more accessible for everyone. So, look, I sort of look at the game and I sort of view it as it's a free hit now, which is kind of weird to say when we're in such a tenuous position. But when you're sort of going into a game with as bad form as we have against a side playing as well as Leeds, you sort of go in with no hope of a result. And, you know, maybe that loosens up the players. Maybe they won't be as worried as they were against a Barnsley. You know, you see it before when we were fighting relegation and we would lose to Sunderland but beat Liverpool or a side like that. So it does sometimes happen. Players do have that sort of funny mental block sometimes. And, you know, you've just got to hope if we can get some sort of result against Leeds, maybe it'll spur us on. Maybe it's just a matter of hoping we can get through the weekend without getting too much of a damage to our goal difference and hoping the sides below us lose. But how are you looking ahead to it?
Look, I think we've done everything we can on our end, sending our boy Mitch over there. I think he will be the good luck charm for us, and on Saturday morning, I believe, our time. And I think that I always had this feeling when I was over there that the team was a better chance of winning if you were there on a trip and finally got to see one of the games. Is obviously following Hull from this side of the world, we're not always privileged to go and see the games, but I think that by Mitch being there, I think it increases our chances by about 70% of getting a result.
Look, you make a great point. I'll point out my first game over there at Hull was against Liverpool, where we won 3-1, and then when I think both yourself and I were in attendance against Fulham, 6-0, you know, twice as much Australian good luck. I had another friend who was over there against Stoke last season. I think we won 2-0. So there is something in the Aussie good luck charm. So I think absolutely Mitch can do the magic and get the result for us. Will be fantastic.
That's a magic man. Let's back him in. I'm going to call it. I think it's going to be the upturn in the season that we need, and I think that we might sneak as you mentioned, a very scrappy result. I think the quality of the game will be poor, and we'll bring Leeds back to the current level we're playing at. And I think we might sneak at 1-0, and you'll probably find Mitch lost at a pub in Hull somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I did say to him, look, you know, if I can't catch him after the game, which I don't expect I would be able to, I'll try and catch him the day after, because I suspect after the game he'll either be drowning his miseries or he'll be celebrating a fantastic result. In terms of personnel, in terms of lineup, is there any sort of major changes that you'd like to see to the side? I guess obviously with Terrell, Burke and Device potentially all missing, that's 3 players to replace. I thought Stewart and Lopez looked pretty solid in midfield together today, so I thought that was quite promising. I guess, you know, obviously Wilkes to fit back into the side, and I guess what McLaughlin and Pennington at centre back.
Yeah, a lot of questions around our defence. And clearly, if you're going to be versing, well, not the league leaders, they're in second at the moment, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, look, whenever you're hosting a team that's flying that high on the ladder, your defence is probably the most important thing. So, obviously, we have to wait and see what unfolds from the injury report this morning. And if all hands are on deck, I think that's probably the biggest questions that we need answered for the team lineup. And if Burke and Device are fit, that gives us a far greater chance of being able to pull something out of the hat.
Absolutely. So going with a 1-0 scrappy win, I'll probably try and go with something similar. Knock on wood, we can get a result against Leeds. At the end of the day, I think even a draw or a slim loss is enough of a confidence boost from my point of view for that one. But thank you for joining me, Logan.
Not a problem. It's good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone for listening. And hopefully we weren't too depressed or too down in the dumps after a couple of poor results. Hopefully we can find a few silver linings, find a few things to get optimistic about, and look ahead to a pretty intense, pretty exciting, I guess, end to the season. But until next week, come on City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black. We're going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're out.